Welcome to the Uncomfortable Conversations podcast, the untold stories of the 3HO Kundalini Yoga community. I'm your host, Guru Nishan, and I was born and raised in 3HO. And like many of you, I care so much for the people of our community that have come in and out of our community over the years. And so I started this podcast to really address a lot of the complexity that we've faced over the last year or so. And I have several intentions that I read at the beginning of every episode. I encourage you to listen to them and to share this podcast with someone who has not yet been a part of it. Number one, to break the veil of silence that has long permeated and continues to strangle the 3HO Kundalini Yoga community in the name of neutrality. Number two, to validate and help clarify the complex feelings of those who have joined this lifestyle, were born and raised into it, and or who have practiced or taught Kundalini Yoga. Number three, to encourage active listening to uncomfortable conversations from our community as a revolutionary act of self and collective healing. Number four, to let survivors know that we see them, we believe them, we love them, and we will fight for their truth to be addressed. Number five, to let teachers who are denying, gaslighting, or spiritually bypassing know that what they are doing is willfully ignorant and re-traumatizing victims. Number six, to illuminate the inherent racism, homophobia, cultural appropriation, and exploitation that perpetuates the teachings, 3HO lifestyle, and the overall community ethos. Number seven, to stop the perpetuation of gaslighting and victim shaming by naming it for what it is. Number eight, to dismantle internalized shame, guilt, toxic positivity, and light-washing mentality. Number nine, to honor each and every body that has come through our community, both named and unnamed. And number 11, to encourage people to do their own research, process their own emotions, get therapy, somatic therapy, and other therapy and support as needed, to draw your own conclusions, and to be critical thinkers rather than to just blindly follow anyone. Please remember that your story matters. Please share it when you're ready. We're here to listen and to support you. Today's guest I want to welcome is Taran Kaur. Her birth and original name was Alice, and she started practicing Kundalini Yoga in 2014 in her late 20s by following the guidance on 3HO's website on Kriyas, meditations, and practicing doing many 40-day practices with them. Through this, she quit drinking alcohol and focused on getting on the mat every day rather than nursing a hangover. Alice continued to practice Kundalini Yoga with teachers on YouTube, and at the end of 2016, after switching to healthcare and doing Radiant Body Kriya for 40 days, she realized the reality of her destructive relationship that she was in with a partner of 9 years, and she left and returned home. Alice went to Kundalini Yoga Level 1 teacher training at Sahej in the UK with Hari Kaur and Siri Singh in 2017. She followed the call to finally teach yoga after years of practicing many different styles such as Hatha in her teens, Bikram in her 20s, and here is where she got given her Kundalini name Ajeet Amrita Kaur. Through the teacher training, Alice Ajeet fell in love with Sikh Dharma and went to Khalsa Camp to discover its depth. Alice Ajeet went on to learn and embrace Sikhi from more Sikh camps, was blessed with Amrit in 2018, and given the name Taran Kaur. Then legally, she changed it to Taranjeet-Kaur to honor her Kundalini background, but ironically, she has always shortened it to Taran. Taran, now 31, is navigating married life, mother to one daughter named Satnam Kaur Evie, and she ditched Kundalini Yoga in 2020 and continues rising early to meditate, is studying to be a therapist, and makes art in her free time. I want to welcome Taran to the podcast today. Thank you for being here.
Hello, thank you.
Hello, what a pleasure. Thank you for reaching out and being willing to come and share your story.
Yeah, great.
Let the listeners know what makes you feel like you're wanting to share your story.
I think after hearing your podcast, and also I know it's quite early since it's happened, but there was a big yoga teacher in the US, Guru Jagat, who passed, and I was watching the feed of them talking about it, and it was a very sensitive time, and then they just jumped into a kriya, and I get that maybe it's a yogi way of life, but at the same time it brought me back to when I was grieving and I just jumped into a kriya instead of processing, and I really felt for the students, and part of me went, oh my god, it's happening again, like to so many people, because it's a very sensitive time when you're grieving. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think that's really potent reflection.
Yeah, and obviously since the Premka book came out, like a lot of changes have been happening from then, because that was one blessing, really great blessing.
You mean her book being published and all that coming
Yeah,
forth?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I want to get to the point where you tell us what happened when you read that book, but I would really love for us to get the history. Obviously, we just heard a little bit about your narrative, but where would you like to start in terms of sharing?
Uh, yeah, I could start from like the beginning. So like I said, I did Hatha in my teens, and then I did Bikram in my 20s, and then I only stopped Bikram when like the heating system broke and I got hit by a car, and I was like, can't do any yoga for a few weeks. So I read a book on Kundalini. It was literally just Kundalini. It wasn't anything else. And I just thought, oh, I think there might be some yoga to do with this thing. So I started doing yoga YouTube videos and just feeling really like upbeat and happy. And then I realized that I could do it more through 3HO. It had loads of like mantra translations and kriyas and meditations. So I just kept doing that. And like I said, I made a lot of changes. Like instead of going out drinking and wearing like loads of makeup and stuff like that, I just decided to like use that morning time to do yoga. I had a creative space where I made art and I just rolled out the mat in there. And then from that, I kind of went all in. I went backwards to how people usually do it. So I went to Kundalini Festival in the UK. It was a really great experience that year. That year happened to be Basics of Sikhi there, and like I could have chosen a dance class, but I happened to travel with two people, and one of them was like a practicing Sikh called Nanak, and he was like, "You could try that, maybe go to this thing." So I went and learned from them. Also, there was an amazing teacher there called Carolyn Cohen, and I didn't go to her class, but she had a completely different energy and style because her hair was so short, and she was just so like, I remember her staring at me, and I didn't know what was happening, like, and I really think like everyone was raving about her class, and she was just so much of a non-conforming person. And I think what would have happened if I went to her class anyway. So and then I decided to go to White Tantric and do that in London. They do it for like 6 hours in Kensington. And then obviously I did the Radiant Body Kriya from another YouTuber. She sent me like the Kriya because she was doing a free series on 10 bodies. And yeah, eventually I think I was moving in a different direction. But yeah, I left a really destructive relationship, and that was just I felt at the time it's from having more courage, but it could have been like from it could have been from anything, but so at that time I was like, it must be the Kundalini yoga that's changed this. But
Well, and you had such transformation. So, like to quit alcohol, like to have kind of like the self
yeah, that was
transformation, and then awakening to leaving an abusive relationship. Like, how would you not attribute it to this new practice, right?
yeah, exactly, yeah. And so then I went back to another Kundalini festival, in the UK, I think at that time. But it was like, it was very different, and it was less of the first one had like a Sikhi kind of, everyone was making foods, and it was more like a homely environment. But this was like back-to-back classes, and Yogi Bhajan's face was on the wall in pop art, and it was a bit more like, whoa, I can see like my whole body was aching afterwards, and not in a good way. Like, so so when I moved home, I was able to do teacher training. I really wanted to do that, and it cost like 250 a month. So I had a set amount of money, and I did that. And I think that's when I kind of like, everything changes in teacher training, because you're told to wear white, you're told to cover your head more, you're told to, and like at that time, I don't know if it's how it is now, but a lot of it was like Yogi Bhajan quotes, little stories that maybe I can remember and share, and everything was like romanticized. That's how I feel about it now. And I do think part of Kundalini Yoga is quite a lot of stamina work, and I'm quite a stubborn person, and I like, endurance. So like, I was like, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to be on this. So yeah, so I can talk about that more. But during the break, because we had a month we weren't doing it, I went to Khalsa Camp, because I just happened, and anyone could go to it, even though it was a very orthodox and beautiful camp. But now I think back to it, it's quite orthodox. And I met a friend there who we did Japji, like, because I remembered it from training. And then suddenly another prayer came up, and I said to him afterwards, I was like, what did you read? He was like, that's Jap Sahib. And I was like, there's more Barney? And he was like, well, yeah, there's like thousands of Barney. And I was like, oh my God. So I realized that Kundalini Yoga just gave like a snippet of the Barney, and I really wanted to dive deeper. And instead of just going Gobinde Mokande Abdari Apari, I wanted the whole thing and then ending in that, which is what it does. So, and he knew about Kundalini yoga and Kundalini energy. So I could ask him questions like about the naming thing. I was like, my name is Alice, but now I'm Amrita, Ajeet Amrita. And then all these people are like getting names, and then like suddenly they're this new name. And he was kind of like unpacking it a bit for me and saying like, don't take it too seriously, because someone's getting that donation from you. And some people have like 5 names, and it can just get a bit ridiculous. And I don't know, he's still in my life now. I still talk to him and ask him complicated Kundalini questions, which is great. Yeah, I might mention him again.
And what was this? Was he
Govinda, yeah.
or was
He's a Punjabi Sikh as well, but he knew of Kundalini and Kundalini Yoga.
okay.
And back then he was like 17 and I was like 27 or something. So he was like he's a really young, wise spirit, and like he's like a brother to me. But even then I questioned like, what is the Sat Nam? Like, I'm so confused, because Sat Nam is said so much, but I don't feel it, like, because it's meant to be truth is your identity. I am truth, but it just something's up. I can't tell what it is. And he was saying there's thousands of translations. Yogi Bhajan just translated it so people could easily understand it at that time. And it's different to how I would say it now as well, if you want me to share that like quickly. So this is something called Kiddie Sangha, and it's from my daughter's nursery rhymes. So I now think of it in the most simplest sense. Sat meaning truth, and then Nam is your relationship to Waheguru. So the only thing that's true is Waheguru, which is it resonates a lot more than just blindly saying Sat Nam to someone in greeting. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that. So then I decided, okay, I'm going to take some classes in Kundalini Yoga, because I've never been to one, and it's required in my training.
Because you had done all your Kundalini Yoga online on YouTube, and you had never actually gone to a class.
White Tantric festivals, everything. And then the Kundalini classes were so beautiful. She didn't have any pictures up. She was just in a church. I don't know how she got in a church, because it's quite strict around here, but with the songs and things. But she did, and like they were beautiful classes. And I went to some gong baths, because at that time gong was really healing, because I had a lot of like, I was still dealing with stuff. So yeah, and then I kept going to Sikhi camps, and I went for Amrit Sancha as well at the one point. Again, I think I went all in with that, and I happened to go to a really orthodox one where we were like chanting the Mool mantra for like 6 hours or something ridiculous, but because of all my Kundalini background, I could do it, obviously. Like, on it when people were looking at me like, how is this white lady, how, like, so they probably thought I was a spy or something, like. So yeah, so I kept going to camps, and that's how I met my husband. We happened to meet at a reunion, and I drove him in my car. That's our little story. So yeah, and then we went to the European Yoga Festival together, and again, I think there were things that, like all throughout my journey, I can remember little things like being brought up, but then I didn't question it, like a lot of times. Yeah, definitely.
Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, sure. So, well, I think just little ones for like, I suppose I can go to a deeper one, like with the whole, when I was reading, and I've skipped ahead, but when I was reading like Premka, I just suddenly got all the intuitive pulls brought back to me emotionally that I'd blocked. So
You mean
like,
along the way, you were getting intuitive, kind of like, that seems off, but not necessarily noticing it too much. So you were saying when you
yeah,
read the book that those flashes came to you.
yeah, because I'm quite like innocent, experimental, like I kind of give things a go. And like just stuff like on training where, I don't know, we'd be told like the teacher would say, oh, I was at Yogi Bhajan's bedside or something, and he said, give me more money to talk to me, give me more money. And like I was a bit like, but then she made it out like it was a very cool thing. Like, and I think it sounds ridiculous now, but I think they even relayed Sikh history back to one of the gurus being part of 3HO as well. And at the time I was like, did I just hear that right? And I even looked it up, and they had written about it on their website somewhere. I
Wow.
thought the dates don't match. It can't. Like, fair enough if I don't want to talk about it because I don't know all the details of Sikh history. But like I just thought, fair enough, one of them did go into the yoga side of things rather than the guru's lineage. But I don't think you can relate it that much. And like even when I was doing martial arts Gutka, it's a Sikh martial arts at one point. I really enjoy it. It's a self-defense. It's quite full on.
Yeah, one of my
Obviously,
brothers is really great at Gutka.
oh, that's amazing.
Goes up
Yes,
the wall, you know.
I love it. It's intense, but I love it. Yeah, so we were doing that, and even the teacher said like, oh yeah, we I don't know if it was him or his team or something, used to go to festivals. Where's your phone? Or was it off my phone? Oh no, it must be my phone. Used to go to festivals like way back in the day, and like Yogi Bhajan would be like, oh no, they can't do any fighting. They can't wear black. Like no fighting is allowed. Like they were all banned from like even teaching people to like learn some skills that may be useful. And that was a bit like, I can imagine that. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I'm curious about the time frame of that because I don't
Yeah.
recall of it. Like I know when he started bringing in kind of the military. Somebody listening is obviously going to know the time frame because Gutka really did get introduced at some point, and so did other
Oh,
sorts of military training. But I don't know what the time frame or how that
yeah.
really came forth. So it's interesting to hear this lens, which we love. Keep going.
Yeah. So, and also, I suppose while I was like coming away from the Kundalini yoga, because I had my baby, and obviously when you have a child, like life changes, and I couldn't do like an hour and a half of yoga. I could just about like do 15 minutes of meditation by her little crib. Like, and that was me like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to cope and concentrate without Kundalini yoga. So, so I was like, I've learned to be like, anyway, so I was teaching again in the September after she was born, and planning and learning and stuff, and that takes up a lot of time, and I really wasn't getting anything for my learnings, my teachings or anything. And I also went out and did like an ebook because it's very easy on Kindle, and like put like a course on my website. But as I was doing all the things and drawing, because I draw, but I felt like I was like doing his work, and I'm not quoting the creator here, I'm quoting Yogi Bhajan, because I was like, I can draw, but why am I just drawing all these yoga things? And like, why is it so simple, but it's spread out like an hour and a half, 2 hours? Like, it's like we're spending so much of our lives doing the Kundalini yoga. It's like it was designed to keep us in one spot doing the yoga.
Mm.
Yeah.
Let me pause you and say, were you having these awarenesses in real time when you were going through it and then just kind of pushed them aside? Or are these types of reflections that you're having now after 2020 revelation?
No, they were happening like at the time. So I was
Okay.
a bit like, this is weird, like this is weird. But like I put it to the side. And then thankfully, like when so Premka came out, right? And I only found out about it through like a video of Skylife on YouTube. Even in like the WhatsApp group of our teachers that we all learned together, I was like, is someone anyone? And a lot of them would like deny it and didn't want to read it at all. And I was just like, oh. And I was at that point, like, do I read it? Do I break that? And I was like, I'm a reader. I love reading. I have to read this book. So I read it, and then obviously you say, oh, that's only one woman's story, but then you dive deeper, and there's more people. You can't deny that there's more people. We can't say that she just did that because she wanted money, or you can't because there's more people. So I read that, and I remember like the night I read that, and I was at Gutka and found out maybe there's this COVID thing happening around the world. Yeah, maybe not. So I could not concentrate, and then COVID happened, and I fell down the stairs with my daughter, and one of my first thoughts, I kid you not, was no more body drops. How am I going to do my body drops? I was like, this is insane.
Wow.
But similar to like how things ended with Bikram, I got like injured, and then I got injured and I stopped Kundalini yoga because I had to practice Pilates for at least a year because it was my spine. Like I need my spine. And I thought Kundalini is quite intense, with the arm movements and the back and the moving. So I thought I have to do this for myself. I have to break free from it a little bit. And I did practice a few things like I like Carolyn Cohen, I practiced with her, but yeah, so yeah, I'll try and share some more things that like came to like and yeah, my intuitive pull, because I do think that's the funny thing on Kundalini yoga. I think like you're told it's the yoga of awareness, but it almost like dampens your awareness a little bit. It dampens your intuition.
Isn't that
Yeah.
strange? Like, even saying that out loud feels so strange.
Yeah, but it's almost very cleverly done. And so with the like when I was before COVID, I was teaching at a cafe and I had these posters put up, and on it had quotes of Yogi Bhajan and then his name at the bottom. And then COVID happened and I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to teach that. And I've just done the posters and Premka's come out. Obviously no one around me knows about any of this either. Like I'm lucky I've had a few people that have been in this with me, because otherwise it just feels like it's all on you. So yeah, so I had those printed, and I realized like all of his quotes are sort of like a double blind. They sort of mean two things. Even like, oh, I'm not here to make students, I'm here to make teachers. That was him like making more teachers, making more money, making his name well known even 20 years later or something. Like,
Yeah, right. And also sending very inequipped, untrained people out to teach a very high intensity, impactful practice that affects us in ways that we took his word for.
yeah, definitely. And I remember hearing on a podcast recently about the whole thing about like we go to it thinking we're having all this like stillness and positive energy and stuff, but we're really just having that dopamine. And I was like, that is so it. And I remember because I'm actually staying at my parents and I was practicing it a lot at my parents. And I remember thinking like I was so rigid in my I have to do my 40 days, I have to do this, I have to eat this, I have to do that. And I was just like, I didn't need to do any of that because like it does make you feel special in a sense. That's another thing that was brought up because you're wearing white and you've got your turban. And I remember on my teacher training, spoiler alert for anyone that's going to do it, for mine, that I did it where we did the Kirtan Kriya and I was the last one in the room, everyone else left. That was the whole thing. And I remember thinking, like, I'm the chosen one at the end, still doing it with my eyes closed. And it makes you feel like that's a bit special. And yeah, and I think it's funny because I thought to myself like I'm not into it, like I haven't got a teacher because I've had so many like YouTubers and all of that, but really I think I was very into it, and I was very much like the person that wore white, the person that read all his quotes, read all his books. And that's why it felt like such an unraveling, because I realized, oh my God, um so many like things that I've just put aside.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to just pause on that teacher training note, that the point you make about the double binding language. It's so fascinating because, yeah, different meanings are interpreted, which is essentially like what happens, right? A different one consciousness will take in this meaning, another consciousness will take in that. And lectures will have that like word salad where it's just filled with bunch of things that are sounding really deep. But if you actually take it sentence for sentence, you can kind of be like, what does that mean actually?
Yeah, and definitely. I used to listen to the Library of Teachings a lot, and at first I was like, oh, okay, this is good. But over time, like I remember saying to my husband, like, I've just listened to one, and he's just talked about cake for like 20 minutes. Like, there's nothing to pick out, but you'd think there was from this beautiful spiritual teaching. And I
Mm-hmm.
just remember thinking that, and I was hearing his voice, and I was like, there's something really odd here. Like, I can sense it, but I don't get it. Like,
So on that, right, this idea that we're strengthening our intuition, this is the yoga of awareness, and there are a lot of qualities that fulfill that. And then simultaneously, this like subtle opposite of that simultaneously. And so what I hear you saying is almost kind of like brushing the thoughts like, what was that? Well, no, brushing it across, no, and
yeah,
realizing, wow, your system was alerting, but it was so kind of mixed up or convoluted. Like, if it's talking intuition, then we think, oh no, it is teaching me to connect to me where I'm feeling myself. And yet there can be another teaching wrapped up in that that actually negates that, or with the delivery of the way that information comes to the students suddenly negates the very thing of, oh, you have a direct connection, say, to God or to source yourself, not.
yeah.
But you need a teacher. You're direct, but you have to have a teacher. That's, for instance, another example that
Mhm.
it's confusing to the consciousness a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think because I came into it at a time where I thought, oh, I'm independent, I'm free now, la la la, I was still building such a sense of self. And I think it would have been more helpful just to breathe and have some stillness in those years. But I decided to like go for it.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm trying to think of some more like teacher training examples. I think the help, because we did check-ins and the check-ins are quite deep. And like obviously people shared and then we just said Satnam. And that's the other thing actually. I did feel like every festival, every camp, everything, not camps, festivals I went to and things, there was like no Sangha. Everyone was doing their own thing. No one was talking to each other's friends.
Hmm.
Like for white tantric, everyone would be like, I'm dealing with my own stuff. Like I understand, but if it's got the Sikh Dharma in it, one key thing is you have Simran, you have Seva, and you have Sangha. But I always wondered why that was missing. If it's a yoga and it's a union and everyone's supposed to be together.
So talk a little bit more about that, because I don't think a lot of listeners would have a real understanding of Seva Simran, like give us
Oh,
an
okay.
example of what it means for you, and then how it showed up in, say, Sikhi circles that you got connected with, but you didn't feel that within the
Um,
3HO Dharma. Um, I just find that a really interesting point.
okay. So yeah. So I I just feel that yeah. So the festivals, like everyone was doing their own thing and like practicing yoga, but like I was on my own, for instance, and there was no opportunity to really like make friends or be around. Like everyone was very separate, even if we were just dancing on in a field in white like we used to. Like whereas if I went to a Sikhi camp, people would like sit together. We'd talk about topics on like I don't know, Gurbani or our lifestyles and all kinds of things. And so you'd be there talking about life and like faith together. And I don't know that. And Simran is like we doing Kundalini yoga, like singing Vaheguru, Vaheguru. That's Simran. Seva is obviously helping, like we do in teacher training, and yeah, Sangha is like holy company. So you can have Sad Sangha, holy company, and Sangha is where you're friends with someone, and also you have that relatedness of being in the same faith or doing the same thing. So you have that kind of bond, but I don't think there are any bonds. And that's another thing. When I almost went to a different teacher training, but the person I was with, who I went to one of the festivals with, she was like, oh yeah, I was gonna do this one, but I've quit because they're just asking me to do so much seva. All of the course is seva. And I was just like, no, I want to learn something. I'm not paying to like do seva all the time. And that's one thing that kind of um like came up. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say is my experience or my approach or thought of that was how Seva, how like within the festival or whether it's at Solstice, how Seva is kind of built into like the labor of just attending as opposed to where is my devotion, right? Where do I get to be devoted to experience Seva as a practice as opposed to I have to do this as a part of attending, which is fine on one aspect, but then bringing up Sangat or Sangha, this idea that, Sangat is when you go to sadhana together, when you're eating bread, and yet what I hear you saying is even though those things were happening, we sat in the lines to eat, or we went to sadhana together, you weren't feeling an actual connectivity or the relational vulnerability of what it means to get to know people.
Yeah, to get to know people, because we're saying the truth is within. I see the truth within you, but I don't know you. I'm just being polite and giving a greeting of some sense. So I always sensed that there was something missing.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. So when the Premka book came out, I think things did crumble, and like because I'm obviously not in any community, it was like crumbling from the inside. And luckily I had like someone on the phone, or I was in the kitchen once and they were like talking to me about it, and I just thought thank God, because it feels like I'm going insane, because like I'm not part of a like community, but I've done it on the side that's so much in my life, because like I wore white a lot because I was teaching, but also I think it's a gradual thing. Like I remember you saying recently, like you get told, oh, you look so nice in a dastar, like so nice in a turban, you're so radiant. And he said that thing about being 17 times more radiant and stuff like that. So I'd be at the shop thinking, are they doing Kundalini yoga? And then I'd be like, I'd hear a YouTube thing like, oh, I need that in white from a yoga test. So I'd go out and buy the thing in white, and I'd have a whole wardrobe of white. And I went through this COVID stuff. I went through my white clothes and I dyed them all purple. And then, and I went on like a photo shoot and I was wearing a black dress with white flowers, because I was like doing like a fuck you yogi version, like I'm wearing different clothes. And then Sikhi style, I wore navy, and I bought like 5 dresses in navy because I was like, well, maybe I'll try this. And then I was just like, I'm going to wear whatever fucking color I want. Do you know what I mean? So now I'm shopping and I'm like, oh my God. But then obviously no one knows. Like I actually look like how I did before the Kundalini yoga. I've got like the exact shirt somewhere, a pink one that I did before it. And I was like, this is so weird. No one knows all the journey that happened. Yeah. So yeah, what point was I making?
Just kind of how the veil started unraveling inside you after the book.
Yeah. So and I really, really felt for her, because I'm sure in it said that she too was into her like creative practices and stuff like that, and it all got pushed aside. And I do feel like that was another thing. I feel like he really wanted Kundalini yoga to be in everyone's focus, to be doing it at the class, at the house. And like doesn't lead you to know what do you want. It's just like you want to do your Kundalini yoga, that's it. Like it's very rigid, very one pointed, when it didn't match up with it being a householder. I don't feel necessarily, because it's like you're meant to be doing so much. And loads of things just kind of came up, like even doing the sadhana where one of our legs is bent and we're chanting. I was like questioning, like, why? Like in the teacher training, even if you questioned why, it was just kind of dismissed. Definitely, it was always dismissed. And I get it, they're here to train and they still train, and it must be that people maybe don't want to dive into it because they've built a whole life upon teaching as well. And I do get it, that's their livelihood. But at the same
And if you
time,
look at a little crack, you suddenly, it could really go. So it's like unconsciously or unconsciously, you don't want to look at the mini crack because the unravel can go into a real rabbit hole.
And I just remember thinking, like, which Kriya is true now? Is it all made up? Like, what do I do? And things like that. And yeah, it's just been crazy. Yeah.
I find the subtlety of what you're talking about, like in the teacher trainings. I've heard this from more than one person, and I experienced it in my own. But asking a question and how teachers are either mystifying, kind of creating this nostalgic history, that kind of like, ooh, mystical, that kind of like, let me tell you the sweet story of when Yogi Bhajan was on his bedside and blah, 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 blah. And at that, when these senior teachers are telling these stories, it's as if they were there, whatever the thing is. And then a question's asked, right, and it's deflected or however, and it's just so fascinating because, like you're saying, on one level, we're taught we have this masterful technology that's going to change the world, so you do feel special. And then you're wearing the white. So there's like layers of ego building, and yet at the same time, as if there's like this extensive humility in it too. And so it's like the opposites are like infused, which is, it's just interesting. And you're bringing up a lot of that nebulous that you can't touch, but it's right there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think sadhanas are beautiful in Kundalini training, but I think anything can be a sadhana now. That is my view. I don't think we need to be doing loads of mantras. I don't think we need to be doing a whole set. I think anyone could do whatever they want as their sadhana. Like, because it is beautiful. The mornings are beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I definitely know what you mean to do with the teacher train. Like, I did have wonderful trainers, to be fair, but a lot of it like was romanticized. Yeah, like especially how he came to the US and he was I don't even know the truth of it, because I hear he came to the US, he was an airport person, but then he saw these people and wanted to heal them, blah blah blah. And while I was like, okay, that makes sense, but why didn't he start doing it when he was like younger? Like why? And then why has he suddenly got heart disease and diabetes and in a wheelchair, even though he's meant to be a yogi master? Like I mean, I know I'm not a doctor, these things happen, but at the same time, I was a bit like, this is a bit like karma coming back if something happened. And I don't know, it just didn't, a lot of things just didn't sit right. But at the same time, I was just like happy. I was like high on like so much yoga. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and and for the story to be woven that he was sick because he's taking everybody's energy on, as opposed to being gluttonous, predatory, abusing, eating wrong, not doing the very teaching. Like nobody thought that could be it. Well, he's drinking diet soda on the stage every night, like these things, even though they were in plain sight, they weren't allowed to be questioned because he automatically had that master status. And so it's just fascinating over the years how much got oversighted in the name of that mastery.
Yeah, and I do what was I going to say? Yeah, I do think back to like when the book came out, I was just like, most obviously all the bad things happened, but I was also like, he's not practicing what he preaches, and I can't stand that. Like that's a one principle that I really adhere to. Like, yeah, I might be Sikh, but I'm not telling you like loads of things because I'm not here to preach to you. I'm not perfect, so I'm not gonna give that to you. Do you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
Yeah, so I'd rather just be real. And if he's suddenly saying like and that's another thing, because he'd be like, oh, trying to empower women, but then it's like, well, no, it feels like they're squashed down like under all these layers. So like you can't do both things,
and yet both are really there. And then if you're asked that, then automatically one can go into the teachings of polarity. Well, we're not talking about the fact that polarity exists. Of course it exists in the universe. We're asking why what you just said contradicted something else you just said. But in a setting where you're the student and this is this elevated teacher, and the teachings kind of have this idea that when you find your teacher, don't question the teacher, follow the teacher. You will only have one teacher. And that, at least in my upbringing, it always felt so contradictory to the base wisdom of Guru Nanak that said, you're direct. So I remember always feeling a little contradiction around they said you have to choose your teacher, and I was like,
Yeah, it's almost as if he did run on the whole thing where, like, obviously Guru Nanak spoke a lot about truth, but you have to be truthful in order to live a true life. Like, but it's almost as if he put himself in that stance and was like, okay, I do wonder, I don't know if you found it when you were growing up, that he was obviously Punjabi Sikh, and a lot of there was just like not Punjabi Sikhs around him. I do wonder if people came to him because he was this magnifying mystical character, like, because Punjabi people can have this like really amazing like persona and stuff like that.
have you ever seen some of his early pictures in 1969? I mean, he was one good looking dude, you know, talk
Yeah,
about good looking Punjabi. Yeah, I mean, come on, we know there's good,
yeah,
and
I
I
think
mean,
it's that
and
in his
like
abuse.
1969 and his like turban and he, you know, nice, good look. And I think Premka's book, the Premka book, described that, like the magnetism of his energy, and that like she spoke about being violated in that first class, and like
Yeah.
any good woman, you know, good woman, were questioning, was that really just violation? I mean, I know he just put his hand on my breast, but
Like,
maybe
thinking,
he
oh my
didn't really
God.
mean to. Maybe he sees, and so the prey energy internally goes off to say, oh, maybe that wasn't actually sexual violation. And, you know, and I thought the book really spoke to that. Like, I think anybody in a
That just
body.
made me go like, oh my God, it's from the first instance, like she's think like this must be a test. And I'm like, no, no, he's pushed the boundaries. Like, no, no, no. Like, yeah. And the fact that she was in bow pose for a long time, I was like, oh my goodness. Like, yeah, it really did open things up like that, definitely.
Well,
Yeah. But
and
yeah,
then that first day, you know, getting an assignment to translate something or to write something, whatever that was in her book, I found again all those things very fascinating because it's a part of her own memoir. It's like irrelevant whether somebody believes it or not. The point
yeah.
is, it's like, wow, if you really feel that experience, we've all had an experience where we were in a violated situation and didn't really know.
Yeah,
What?
and that's another thing. I suppose it's like quite small, but like in the teacher training, he was mentioned a lot, but he had so many female staff who did translate the Japji, for example, and none of that was mentioned. And over half the class are female. So if you're gonna like empower people, why not include the early people who actually helped bring Kundalini yoga or like did something really significant? Because that I thought, oh my goodness, like she did such like it's not easy translating something like that. It's not at all. And she worked so hard on that. And I was like, wow. Yeah.
Very
Um,
interesting.
yeah. Um,
So, if I hear you right, you were teaching Kundalini Yoga, practicing a lot, definitely more into the Sikh lifestyle, and had kind of changed your life and really felt more about the Sikhi path, but you were still practicing and interweaving Kundalini Yoga as a part of your
oh
regular
yeah.
routine. And that is what got pierced in 2020. So, that changed after the book?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously I literally couldn't practice any yoga because I'd hurt myself.
But that was
So
before the book.
oh no, that was like a bit after. Like all kind of all happened at the same time. It was like a tidal wave.
Interesting.
Like um so
Fascinating.
all happened at the same time, and then COVID hit, and like I think because of many people finding COVID, like you're forced to deal with stuff because you're outside your normal thing. And I suppose I did do some classes online, and I noticed like someone that had trained with us but then they had to stop because they were ill, so they trained like 2 years later. I joined their classes and all the people were freshly white. Oh, hang on a sec. Freshly in white, freshly like and we were all like rolling up in our tops in our, like with our cups of teas, like it's the class starting, like, and I was just like, whoa, like um yeah, like little things like that really stuck out. So yeah, I stopped, and I think I decided like I'm just going to sit here and breathe, like, and I think I found some stillness in that. um but it did feel strange to like let go of Kundalini yoga because it's like, is it gonna like affect me? Like, am I gonna be able to concentrate, focus, still be this amazing humble person or whatever? So yeah, I think I even said to my husband, I was like, And I stopped listening to lots of music, Western music, which I love, and I have gone back to listening to it, like Taran Kaur and all that. I said to him, I think I'm going to let the Kundalini yoga go a bit. And he was like, good, great, G, that's great with me. Like, and I was like really like nervous to say that. And yeah, he was kind of like, I'm glad you're not doing your mad ones. Like, although we often went to workshops together and things like that. Because there was it's not actually that big in the UK, I don't feel. Like there are a few centres in London. There was a Joy yoga studio that opened before. And that was kind of the central point people went to. I mean, yeah. And it is strange. I do think that it maybe is better that people just maybe try out a class, and going all in is definitely like, it's going to take some unraveling and undoing, which is what I'm doing. And that's even making me, I question some parts of Sikhi as well. And like how I was just so rigid, and I've just become a lot more relaxed and like asking what I want. Like I know what Yoga Bhajan wants, I know what the Kundalini people are saying, I know what my friend wants, I know what my husband wants, but what do I want? I think that's what's missed out a lot throughout my journey.
Where are you in
Yeah.
that narrative, right? And your narrative of your life.
Yeah, and that's like he said, it's the funny thing, because you think you're doing this yoga, you're being spiritual, you're eating all this healthy food, but actually, like, are you ignoring who you are just because you're following something that's like in a textbook? Like, yeah, with
I can't say what you're saying is important enough. Like it's so radically important when it comes to like our nervous system well-being to be like, where am I? Where am I in this? Because what I have learned specifically, what I used to think was bringing me to my center by practicing Kundalini yoga, I realized wasn't actually my center. It was what I had been trained to believe was my will. But I had been severed from my own will. I couldn't feel me. I couldn't feel myself in there. But I had been trained that that was myself. So if I think, well, and so like what you're bringing up when you say, well, I'm thinking of giving this up, but what if this, what all those fear thoughts is what I started noticing. As soon as I kind of was like, where am I? I'd be like, all these fear thoughts. Oh, but this might happen. And I was like, why am I swirling in fear when I say, oh, I'm not going to do this practice? Because if I was really coming to me, I wouldn't be operating from this deep scarcity or fear place.
Yeah, wow, that's so true. And I do think it's amazing, like on this podcast, for example, because you've got people that were like born in 3HO like you were, and other people that came into 3HO very early. And then I do think, like, for example, I came into it so like in the 2000s or whatever, but it still hugely affected me. So like that, he had that power, he had that, his name on everything, tea bags and everything, to like influence so many generations. And yeah, that's why I thought I'd come forward, because there could be someone out there who, like me, was like, should I do teacher training? Will it help me? Da, 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 da. And actually give it some thought. Like, don't rush. Like, you know,
To keep yourself in the equation is what I hear you're saying. Like, stay steady and feel you and make these choices from this place of like radiating from you.
Yeah.
And yet know that the teaching itself is kind of like seductive and drawing you out of you to say, oh, those aren't you. This is the real you. And we have this special thing that can help you feel special and change the world.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
It's so subtle. And I think that what you're bringing up throughout this whole episode is so beautiful, because it's like truth wrapped in deception, and then deception wrapped in truth, and both exist. And it's somewhat why I am really adamant that these types of conversations have to be spoken, because just taking his name out of the teachings doesn't take a lot of the predatory practices that are infused in the operating system or the ethos that he created. And a lot of the teachers are parroting that because they've learned to do that. It's not because they want to. I think they're just perpetuating it because they actually it's like we teach what we think is right until we get our veil pierced and realize, oh my God, it wasn't what I thought it was.
Yeah, and it's so funny because throughout my being a teacher, I'm quite glad that there was no one I taught that was like me who went all in. Everyone wore black. Everyone seemed a bit more like woken up to the fact, like, what is she like? What? I mean, at the time I wore a star and I was Sikh anyway, but so I thought kind of tried to separate it. But I just thought to myself, these people aren't like how they were in the very beginning. They're just like, "Meh." Like it's just interesting. And also I did just remember in the training there was a meditation. And that's another thing we were told to do.
Explain that for the listeners.
Okay, so Traticum meditation, as I know it, is in the manual. There's a picture of Yogi Bhajan, and they've like cut out his face. They cut out his face. He's got his beard and turban.
It's like one of the most hypnotic pictures you'll ever see. He has this like weird gaze.
Yeah, he's got like little whites in his eyes, and we were told to like put it in a frame and sit there and like look at the whites of his eyes and like meditate on it. And for some bizarre reason, I thought, yeah, I can try it. So my family kind of like go with the flow. Like I could be doing something weird, like a tracker meditation in the living room. And they're just like, oh, Alice is okay. So anyway, so I was doing that. And then I was just like looking at it thinking, this is ridiculous. I'm looking at a man's eyes and I can just look at the sun outside and get a much better like viewpoint. Like, and I think that is a saving grace. Can you imagine if I did that for 40 days?
Yes, I can imagine. Yes.
Like, great. Yeah. So like things like that, like were a bit like, And I think nowadays, like, especially in London, you wouldn't like associate things like this to do with a cult because people have a perception that cult is like in a community, like you don't, like you're all together, but actually you can just be in your own life and suddenly all these teachings can like encompass you and change everything. And I think with the wellness industry now, it is almost like, oh, you're not feeling great, let's go and do this, let's fix you, let's heal you. Especially, and I think a lot of people can just not absorb things as well, like they'll just hear something and then repeat it.
There's no integration. They're just like workshop jumping, training jumping, and never actually letting any of the information infuse and change them.
That's another thing I noticed from Kundalini festivals is that it was all go, 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 go. And whereas I've been to like a retreat, for example, before, where you could go to a few workshops, then you could stay in your room and you could relax and reflect and, and you could integrate things. Whereas there wasn't any of that. I wasn't even encouraged.
Oh my God. I have to say, at the European Yoga Festival, I felt the same thing. It was like, I found it so funny that everybody was racing to go to a yoga class. Like I was like,
there were people outside the tents. Yeah.
The stressy energy around getting to the next place because, like you're saying, everything's back to back. And
yeah, and you get these booklets and you're like, I'm going to go to this one and then this one's at 3:30 and this one's at 4:30, so maybe I can go to both. And
yeah, and I remember by my third year there, my practice was literally like, I don't have to do everything. I'm gonna walk everywhere I go. It was like trying to slow that exact point down of
yeah. It's interesting because at the festival I had to slow things down because I was pregnant and it was hot. I can't believe how hot it gets in that area. So I couldn't do all the white tantrics and I just had to sit by a tree lots and eat this like soup with oranges and all this. So I think there's another blessing. I've learned to slow down and not rush and not feel like I have to do the yoga all the time in my life. Yeah,
and it's so fascinating because, again, on one level, like discipline and having really powerful practices that help you change your inner state, like how beautiful. And yet when that rigidity becomes like the base, where there's like this anxious, I have to do this and what will happen if I don't do that, it's so interwoven. It's like, again, good and bad all in there, and it makes you lose self-trust instead of gain it. It's a little odd.
And also I had a lot of questions but I had nowhere to put them, and often people would tell me things but I was just like, I didn't get it. Like I'd have a friend that would say, oh, Kundalini energy is different from Kundalini yoga, and for a while I was like, how like, I don't get it. And it wasn't till like our friendship ended and things like that, because I don't speak to anyone I do my yoga with anymore. And I realized now that like other things can bring up Kundalini energy, like not just Kundalini yoga. Like, but you don't realize that because you get told like stay an ego eradicator for 10 minutes. That's going to boost everything. So you think, okay, I've got 10 minutes, I'll sit down and do this. Like, and just like little things like that. Yeah. And also it was really relieving when I came out of the Kundalini yoga. Oh, this is falling off. This is coming off. Um, with the Kundalini yoga music, I said to my husband, do you know what? It's so nice to be able to sing along to this in the car without waving my arms around and without jumping up and down. I can just listen to it and sing along. And that's how things should be in this. In when you listen to like kirtan, it's very meditative and a contemplative state, and it's almost as if, yeah, it sounds cool and Western and hip, but at the same time, if you can't hear the words and if it's making you like super super elevated, you're not getting the experience of the Gabani in the first place.
The sound current actually penetrating
Yeah,
the
yeah,
body.
totally. Yeah, so that was another thing that really, yeah, I keep having these little realizations that I sometimes share with my husband. Yeah.
So interesting. Now, what year were you at the European Yoga Festival? I think we overlapped.
I think, yeah, 2018. It must have been the summer. Yeah, yeah.
I remember that year so hot. I was there 2016, 17, and 18.
Oh,
It was that last year that I became hyper aware of like what felt like to me was like marketing into Sikhi, where like they would be like after white tantric yoga, anybody who wants to take Amrit, come to the backstage and blah 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 blah, and it was almost like this little infomercial, and it was all
yeah,
about, get to the Gurdwara, come and understand why you should take Amrit. And I think Amrit is such a beautiful choice, and I think practicing Sikhi is such a beautiful choice, and yet where I found myself quite tangled inside was it felt like a marketing funnel. Get people into Kundalini yoga and onto the Sikhi path. And
yeah,
being that your process was that you've connected more to Sikhi, I
yeah. I
just was
mean,
wondering your feeling on that.
yeah. So, like, I've always kind of wondered that. I suppose Kundalini and Sikh Dharma that's attached to Kundalini yoga, and yeah, like I said earlier, like there was people that were like Catholic and they were like, no, 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 I'm Catholic, strictly Catholic. And then there would be people that were like, yeah, okay, I read the Japji and actually it's helping my life a little bit. But obviously I was like the one like Japji. So 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 yeah, I think there's such a big overlap, and I do wonder in these times we're in now, like, does it need to be separated more? Because it's very together, and you've got to understand that it's a faith, and like I don't sometimes I do wonder if it's too washed down. Fair enough, people can need to understand it, and like Ekonkar might be oneness, and that is the essence of it. But when it's too watered down, that's not the point of it. Um,
Well,
yeah,
and it feels very offensive to, at least for me, it feels
exactly.
very
Yeah,
offensive to have students in a class wearing some sort of a half sheet on their head, tied all like crappy in some direction, and they're feeling so much more holy because they
yeah.
decided to
So
put this white piece of cloth on their head. Like that, we're perpetuating that in a teacher training, to me takes away from the history, the long historical nature of where Sikhi came from, and it being a 500-year-old plus religion, and just throwing Japji in there, and then brand new students have no idea the real quality or history,
yeah, and
or
then
understanding this as a prayer.
they think, oh, this is Kundalini, but no, it's actually Sikhi. This is a whole faith on its own. And that's the other thing. I know she's just passed, so maybe it's not the best timing, but so I started learning online from Guru Jagat, and I liked her talks, but I was really realizing how like they were just kind of like waffling, and
What does that
after
mean, waffling?
oh waffling, it's just like like going on, like not really going anywhere. Like that's there you
Word
go, new
salad. Yeah.
saying, new word for you. So 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 yeah, they were just waffling, and then you'd like, but you'd really listen, and if she said like, oh, the Saturn finger can't have a ring on it, then you'd be like, okay. Like, she was very influential, and I remember watching videos of Hari Hajiva, I don't know what his name is. So he would do teacher training videos, because I watched a clip where the teacher training was literally how to word Go Yogi Bhajan's quotes, like how to literally say it so that someone would listen. And I was like, no way.
No way.
And I was like, oh my, and these people were really doing it. And I was like, oh my God, this is madness. And so yeah, I do think, what were we saying? I've gone way off course here. Yeah, I was talking about Guru Jagat and how I got into her, but then this is it. So she got accused of like watering down Sikhi and stuff like that, because she was putting like mantras to do with like making loads of money, having loads of sex, having orgasms, and it's like, that is not what Gurbani's for. Like,
He was saying, do this mantra for all those things.
yeah, like have the best orgasm on your date, like it. And I was just like showing my husband, and he was just like, oh my God, she's gonna get like, that's terrible for like Sikhs, practicing Sikhs. Like, and I do think back like to when we were told like, oh, Yogi Bhajan used to get hate in India and all that, and I think like, and now I think no wonder, because
Right.
they could see through him. But back then I was like, oh, that's so sad. And when I was doing White Tantric, they were like, there's going to be some protesters outside, be careful. And I was like, oh my God, how dare they? Like, but now I get it. Like, a lot of like these little things came up, and no wonder like Sikhs can like get a bit like, because I even got, when I was at somewhere, I was at a farm, I had like a nice dress on and like a pink star at the time. And I got told, oh, you were 3HO. And I was like, like, and he didn't mean it in any offense, and the person I was with, Govinda, kind of like stepped in, like, because he could see I was panicking, like. And yeah, so I do feel that like if we've gone down the path of like, I get that people want to make money and have like a successful life, that's great, but when it's put so much emphasis on like material, like things like that, it's just like, that really, it's almost disrespectful to the Gabani. And I do think that when I first did festivals as well, there was like Shakti dance and Kundalini clubbing, and now I think those things fizzled out and they died. But at the same time, like, again, it's not really scripture that you're meant to dance to, it's meant to be enjoyed. So that's another thing that gets to me now. But I was really interwoven, and I tried, like, yeah, I was one of those, I'm not gonna lie, I was one of those people in a field wearing white dancing. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's whole bodies of work that people have created that then are trying to, make certain things adaptable and the next level of making it relatable, and yet the appropriation of this, it's like it starts somewhere and then it just continues down this long appropriated path to where now people are paying for a name that,
Yeah.
I didn't know how horribly offensive it was, because unconsciously I was rooted in the narrative that Yogi Bhajan had done something special by bringing this to the US, and that we were this group of special people that got knowledge pre most Punjabis. Like, even that narrative is so sick to me now.
Wow, yeah.
We were given special knowledge that historical Sikhs didn't get. And so he gave us a narrative that was better than the Punjabis, which then trying to get Punjabis into Kundalini, and the mishmash, once again, it's a little bit of truth mixed with a little bit of not truth, and it's all infused and it's confusing.
Yeah. And I do wonder if the trainings will change. Like you said, with the Japji being in the trainings, I mean, obviously it is a beautiful morning time prayer, but at the same time, it's mainly read by practicing Sikhs.
That to me is horribly offensive. So that you get a brand new yoga student in, and you're saying a part of this yoga is, now a principle is using the tongue on the upper palate yogically, right? This affects the glands. So how powerful. But then to tie in, you need to read Japji so that your tongue moves. No, understand the context of this historical prayer, and that there's lots of, say, historical ancient languages that create sound current in our mouth in a certain way. But at least connect the two. Don't just hijack the religious practice and infuse it and then give a new yoga. Because now a new yoga student's out saying, I'm reading this Kundalini prayer. No, that's not even a Kundalini prayer. It's a Sikh prayer. And it's one of the founding ones.
Yeah. I think that's why I went to the Sikhi like side of things, because I was like, wait a minute, this Kundalini, I don't think I can justify, oh, I wear Kundalini thing on my head just for good energy. No, there's something deeper here. So that's where I think I went to it from, which is a blessing, because it's funny, because I do think, was he trying to just get people into Sikhi as well? Like, I'm not sure about that, because it's like, it's like, why? And if you question it in the teachings, you're just told like, oh, that's how we do it, that's what's done. And it's just like, but like, why? Like, it's like someone else doing a yoga and then reading, I don't know, some other scripture in there, like, and not being into it. And yeah.
It is. I just find it so fascinating. And like you brought up earlier, you didn't even know Jop Sahib, you know? Well,
Yeah.
there were Kundalini Kriyas where you're bowing to Jop Sahib and Jop Sahib's playing, but you didn't necessarily learn to read it the same way or understand
Yeah.
the full scripture or where it fit in within the bodies. You didn't get a real
Yeah,
context.
because there's oh, I might get this wrong now. So you have like 5 morning prayers, and he's basically I do feel like he basically took mantras from all the 5 morning prayers. And there was a bit in our teacher training where we got told, oh yeah, he does all his morning prayers and he does Reras at the same time. Reras is an evening prayer.
Evening prayer.
You do it in the morning just to get out of the way. Like, like what? Like, but anyway, so yeah, you have Jar Upside, which is covered in a few Kundalini tracks actually, and it's very upbeat. It's meant to be like a not a warrior, but it's meant to be like an upbeat one. And again, it's something you want to develop. You want to actually. The other thing I got into Sikhi, so I was like, I looked at all the translations, so I can't read the Gabani, but I can read the like phonetic version, and I can look at the English. So because it's another thing, I do feel like things just get watered down or they just get lost in translation. So always look at the translation to see if it resonates
Mm,
as well. Yeah.
very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So when all of this came out in 2020 and you had already fell down the stairs and started having epiphanies to stop practicing, obviously you've been a part of the Sikh faith and married a Sikh man. Um, the question I was going to ask was when more stories started coming out, obviously not all of that was public, but then the AOB report, did you read that? Did you read
Yeah, so I did. So I was on well, there was like a group, wasn't there, on Facebook? It's probably
the
still around.
Facebook, the cage? Yeah, exactly. The Beyond the Cage group is what it's
Yeah,
called
so I was
now.
on that and I read people's stories, but it was just like, it was kind of heartbreaking and it wasn't helping. And my thing is, if it's not helping and it's hurting, I'm gonna stop eventually. So I just stepped away from the group, but I wanted to just see what else was out there. And I liked, there was like this thing with like loads of descriptions like spiritual bypassing and all that. So I could kind of gather some more not technology, sorry, knowledge from those technology, scientific technology. Um, so I could kind of gather some more things from there. And then, yeah, I was reading the report and then it kind of, everyone was like writing their things in it. So I left it alone. I remember being on the phone and saying to my friend Govinda, like, oh my God, is like, I've read the report and like people were forced to shave. That does not make sense in Sikhi. Like, keep your body hair if you want to practice being a Sikh. Like, well, some people do, some people don't. I'm not judging that at all. But at the same
We
time,
know that one of the primary tenets is to not
yeah,
clip your body hair.
yeah. So I was like, how can he be anyway, and it's how can he be Sikh and be telling that and all the things about like homophobia and like like just sexual abuse and all of these things um and yeah, and some people will be like, oh, some people have made it up and they've just, anyone can write it down. But even my friend Govinda, for example, he was like, I know someone in Spain and yeah, I believe their story. So it was so like at the same time, like while I get people might make things up, I was like, no, there's definitely some truth here. Finally, we all talk about truth and the truth is coming out more. Like everyone's intuitive pulls that got pulled down have come up to the surface, thankfully.
Mm.
So yeah, I did read that, and that again, that was heartbreaking, and I couldn't like really read it, but I did read what I could. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to point out that there were like different people writing in that were basically saying the same story happened to them. They didn't all talk to each
Mhm.
other. So there were multiple women who had their private parts shaved, and he had actually said to one of them, all your second chakra karma will be gone when you shave your pussy hair.
What?
Right. So, like, how psychosomatically confusing that we grow up in this culture learning how reverent, I mean, to cut our hair was the biggest deal. There's still fear in so many of us to get to break beyond that, just like anybody who's born a Sikh that grew up learning that. It's not an easy, any fundamentalist religion, to break out of what seems very basic for the average person out there is not to break out of fundamentalism.
Yeah, so it was just like, and there were patterns, like you said, there were patterns. This person had this, and I was like, there's a pattern here, but
Can't
at the same
deny
time,
it. They didn't all get together and then share. They all shared anonymously
yeah.
directly.
And I do think there is like the whole thing where obviously there was like an inner circle, and then there was other people, and then there was other people attending the festivals having a wonderful time, but behind the scenes, all this stuff was going on, and people didn't talk to each other and things like that because it was like an age of denial, as like Guru Singh wrote when it was all happening, which is I think is true in that sense.
Yeah, very interesting. So you did read that, started noticing like, wow, that's some serious stuff. So then what now? Where are you at now?
Yeah, so now I've like where am I now? I'm trying to think. So yeah, basically I'm just enjoying my life a bit more. Like even coming to my parents' house, I used to be so rigid. Like I used to just like they used to walk on eggshells a little bit because I'd be like, this has to be like this. This has to be the right bread. This has to be like I have to do my yoga in the morning and things like that. So I'm a lot more relaxed, kind of go with the flow more. Obviously, a child, you have to go with the flow, otherwise, you have to surrender to something, otherwise, you're just going to go crazy. So, yeah, so I'm enjoying being present with her. Yeah, and although like I'm Sikh, I'm definitely I'm kind of rediscovering it again. So I really, because I feel like it was all tainted in a sense, where I covered my head and then I went straight to this and I went straight to this. Whereas now I'm like, no, 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 I'm gonna take my own route to it. I'm gonna learn things again and like really start over in a sense. So and I'm making art again. Uh, I had something happen like recently where I couldn't change it and I was really annoyed and I had to leave this job very suddenly. And it brought me into such a rage, like a healthy, obviously, I didn't hurt anyone. Like I was in a safe container of rage, but brought me out. It's like I had to experience that rage in order to recreate again and not do any drawings of yoga poses. I was like painting the colors and drawing girls again. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's really fun, and it just feels like a kind of like everything is like circular. You kind of just go with it. Yeah.
I want to highlight that last point you just brought up around as you got into your art, you were able to access rage in your body and you weren't able to like get to a place where you wanted to explore again for the first time till that rage got accessed. And it's to me what that felt like for me hearing that was like coming back home to your own emotional body and your humanity, that how I feel matters. I'm not trying to get beyond my feeling. I want to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
fully here and explore with that childlike curiosity.
Yeah, and I think I really had to just let myself feel that because I'm someone that's like, oh no, I'm gonna be nice and happy and good. But I was like, no, I'm gonna feel this. I'm not gonna layer it over with yoga. I'm just gonna feel this. And it's opened me up again to everything.
I think that's just so beautiful. I think it's a very important thing for listeners to hear, in that it's a trauma informed approach to spirituality and yoga, in that historically for thousands and thousands of years we've kind of learned to like bypass over the humanity of how we're feeling in our body, whether it's with ritual or whether it's with a practice or this or that. And there might be amazing techniques, but techniques aren't meant to bypass ourselves. They're meant to help us access ourselves more. So thank
Amazing.
you. Thank you for really
Oh, thank you
highlighting.
for listening and having me on here. It's been great. You're so wonderful and so smiley. I just love it.
Um, Thank you. Do you have anything last you want to share with listeners, or anything last that you want to
No,
express about your
I don't think
experience?
so. Just yeah, just be yourself. you know, just do your thing. Like, yeah, like follow your true north or your true star or whatever calling it is, but go slowly and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Stay with yourself. I want to just mention that you had brought up Carolyn Cohen, and
Oh
she
yeah.
was one of the women I remember meeting at European Yoga Festival. She like ran the food lines or something, so she really commanded the space. But soon after all this came out in 2020, I know she was one of the first people that just started, she was making her own teacher training, like rewriting the teacher manuals, taking out all kind of the religious dogma stuff and kind of focusing more in on the practices of the yoga base, but extracting. So I just wanted to put that out there because
Yeah, no, that I do find that because when I was doing her classes on Vimeo, they were just so like, there was nothing, it was just like so great. Like, and I've always sensed that about her. And I do feel like, I used to just say that in closing, I do feel like some teachers, they could see the storm coming and they changed a few things. Some of us didn't, and the storm came. Yeah.
You know, and I mean, she was she was like one of the head people leading LGBTQ and, you know, lesbian. And I mean, I just love that she was fully rooted in self and didn't mind who she offended. And, you know, it's that, you know, it's like keep self in anywhere we go, right? And anywhere we go, cults aren't going away, predator religions aren't going away, practices, people, communities, but we get better at maintaining and keeping ourselves while learning and like you said, going slow. Take your time.
Yeah.
Ask questions. Notice what happens when you ask questions. All these little things. Read some things on cults so you can check the 101 list.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Thank you, Taran. Tell us about your song.
Oh yeah, my song is Stay Gold by First Aid Kit. There was a time I was in between the training and I was at loads of festivals on my own, and I was like just experimenting, wearing all kinds of clothes, orange bikini. Like it was a great time. And I listened to this song and they were playing on stage, and I just, when I'm driving in the car, I just think it's such a great song, like just to like, I don't know, stay gold. It's just I think it's a great track, and it really brings me back to that happy time, and I'm rediscovering the girl in the orange bikini, even though I'm not wearing one anymore. Yeah.
I love it. All right, so let's go ahead and listen to your chosen song here. It is Stay Gold by First Aid Kit. So once again, we don't listen to the whole song because of copyright, but you can listen to the Uncomfortable Conversations playlist on Spotify. So here we go. For that track. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Taran. Appreciate you.
Oh, it's lovely chatting to you.
Once again, this concludes another episode of the Uncomfortable Conversations podcast, the untold stories of the 3HO Kundalini Yoga community. If you'd like to contribute to this broadcast, you can make a one-time or monthly donation at gurunishan.com/uncomfortable conversations. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, please send an email to me at gn@gurunishan.com. You can also subscribe, follow, and support my work of provocative truth-telling at gurunishan.com. Thank you again for listening. Please like, share, and review this podcast. Share it with a friend on your favorite podcasting platform, and we'll see you again on the next episode.